Welcome back to episode 7 of A Very Welsh Park. Would you mind if I quickly cleaned my teeth whilst I do the intro? I'm just running a bit late. Great. Last week we added 2 flat rides along with our tiny sharks having fresh Welsh cakes, whilst this week we're dedicating the whole episode to one attraction. There we go, done. And I only got a small amount of toothpaste on the microphone. It's time for a family track ride, and not just any family track ride, a Welsh family track ride. Say hello to Valley Racers. You set off on the motorway out of Cardiff for a little jaunt around the Welsh valleys before speeding back to town. Well, with that super complex lore out of the way, let's crack on. I added a few figurative peaks and troughs to the track and then moulded the terrain around them. After laying the queue, I made a start on the station. Now, full disclosure, I came back to this station about 4 or 5 times until I was finally happy, so don't judge this original one too harshly, okay? I went with a modern station to represent the modern city of Cardiff. The whole thing is almost entirely constructed out of art shapes. Along with Daffodil, our flat ride from last week, this will also be part of the yellow zone, hence the yellow. I lined the queue with some custom fencing. Look how custom it is. For this empty section along the front, I whacked in some planters, much like the ones from elsewhere in the park. I swapped this bit of fence for a planter later, so don't get too attached. What's the point in having planters if there's nothing planted in them? I added some trees and other such foliage. Told you the fence was being swapped, I did warn you. As always, I stole our lovely wooden ride sign and positioned it over the queue posts. So, management wanted to get a lovely classic British car to sit out front, but unfortunately all they could find was this very American Eldorado. Oh well. After painting it yellow, I popped it on a ramp, but don't worry, I added a couple of chocks to the wheels. I'm always so health and safety conscious. Also, don't fret, I did recolour the interior white. I don't know why I left it blue for so long, it pains me too. Time for the first scene of the ride, a motorway tunnel, because everyone loves a tunnel. The main structure is made from concrete footers and plaster walls. Because it's literally impossible to tear me away from backstage detailing, I turned our very real looking tunnel into a very fake looking set. For the back of the scenery piece, I used TMTK chipboard and pillars. Back inside the tunnel, I added piping, cabling, and a roof. I stuck some cross beams to the ceiling in order for us to attach some lighting. With one section complete, I could then copy the whole lot to double the length of our tunnel. For scene 2, we'll be cruising down a stretch of the M4. For this, I used terrain paint, fencing, signage, and a ton of foliage. Easy peasy. Wales was once very famous for its coal mining, and thus the Valleys is home to a load of small mining towns. Rather than building a whole town, I went with a simple terraced house facade. I also built it into our existing tunnel set. How's that for efficiency? Considering our roof can't just float in mid-air, I gave it some support by building a metal frame on top of the existing structure. Just as before, I backed everything in chipboard to really sell that set feel. You don't need me to tell you what this is, it's a ladder. As much as we love staring at backstage bits, our guests probably don't, so I masked it with pretend concrete. As we all know, the in-game signs are trash, so I made my own. Some final bits of detailing to the back before we make a start on our pretend houses. I added some pavement using pavement and some pillars using pillars. I don't know where I come up with this stuff. To give the impression of the doors being inset, I surrounded them in pillars and decorative courses. However, I slapped the windows on without a care in the world. Our guttering is about the only thing that isn't pretend, as rainwater still needs to go somewhere. If only there was weather in-game. Time for chimneys, and with chimneys comes smoke, so things are about to get technical. With our fake chimneys in place, I added some piping around the back to house the smoke machines and some cables for power. A touch more clutter and our set piece is complete. Moving on to the aforementioned countryside, I started with a lovely little pond. I dug a hole, filled it with water, added some piping and rock work, and even shoved in a couple of water effects. Crikey. Our water pump would be buried somewhere under these rocks, so I allowed for some access with a tiny drain cover. To connect our pond to the town, I surrounded a portion of it with iron fencing. Next scene. I wanted our little racers to fly through a rural farm, so I constructed a simple barn. After placing the doors, I triggered one of them to open as the car approaches. The other door will be access into the ride's maintenance shed. Once again, Valley Racer's backstage area will be built in episode 11 along with the rest. I went with fairly widely spaced plank walls to allow for some nice shadows to be formed inside the barn. Our racers need some way of exiting this barn, so why not crashing through the side? I moved the beams and planks accordingly. I went for an open roof to once again create some lovely shadows on the ground. I used beams and pillars, but you knew that. Time for some props. I placed some straw, a cart, a pitchfork and a shovel. Our doors can't open themselves, so I wired in an electrical cupboard and an air compressor. Time for that home stretch back to Cardiff. This was just a lot of copying and pasting from the second scene, just reversed to indicate heading in the opposite direction. Finally, we need an iconic image to signify our return to the city, and what better than something you see all over Cardiff, a Brains Beers bridge. Brains is Wales's biggest brewer, and they chose to put their name all over the city, including quite a few railway bridges, so that's what we're going with. I created a mini bridge and stuck the signature lettering on the front. In case you had any doubt, this video is not sponsored by Brains, but hey, if you're watching, hit me up babes, I love beer and money. For the backside, I went with the same chipboard and pillar dealio from earlier. Let us not forget this is all pretend. I finished off this area with some fencing, a retaining wall and some signage. Now comes the time to fill in all the gaps between the scenes, which I mostly did with fences and a metric ton of bushes. You may have spotted that I added a red telephone box to one of the scenes, but I ended up having quite the crisis when I realised I couldn't remember seeing a single one in Wales, despite them very much existing here. In the end, I removed it to save my sanity. At this point, it's also worth mentioning I went back over this entire ride about 3 or 4 times on separate occasions, adding more and more details, repainting things, even ripping the station apart as previously mentioned until I was finally happy. But you'll get to see the final product in the POV at the end. As these trees will be in our backstage area, I created some lovely little planters for them so they could sit nicely on the concrete. I added said concrete, but painfully refrained from going any further, remembering we're saving all backstage till the end. As we approach the end of the episode, it's time for lighting. I dotted a few lampposts around the track, lit the interior of our barn with floods, some additional street lights, and then the usual buried area lights. I installed a few arm lights to illuminate any text, uplit our ride sign, and popped down the usual park lampposts. And just like that, another episode comes to an end. Enjoy the POV and your trip through the country on Valley Racers. Catch you next time.